At Sunday brunch, in front of 8 people at a round table at Magnolia's Bistro on 5th and Crescent in downtown Savannah, Georgia, my daughter leaned across the white linen tablecloth and said to the young waiter, "Separate her bill. She pays for herself." She didn't look at me when she said it. She was adjusting her bracelet. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. The waiter, a young man maybe 22, with kind eyes and an unfortunate position, looked at me. Just for a second. That half second where a stranger looks at you and understands that something ugly just happened and he has to decide whether to pretend he didn't notice. I gave him a small nod. "It's all right, son. It wasn't his fault." I opened my menu and I didn't say a word. That night, my son-in-law called me. His name is Brent, and his voice had something in it I hadn't heard since the night his father passed. "Dorothy," he said. Not Mom, the way he usually called me. "Dorothy." "I'm here," I said. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." "Ask," I said. "Did you do something to upset Wendy before today? Was there a fight I don't know about?" "Because what she did at that restaurant." His voice broke slightly. "Dorothy, I'm so sorry." I sat down in my kitchen chair. I was 74 years old, a widow, a retired schoolteacher, a woman who had spent 31 years in a classroom, teaching other people's children how to read and how to be decent, and my own daughter had just told a waiter to separate my bill at a birthday brunch she had organized and invited me to. "There was no fight," I said. "Then why don't you come over Thursday?" I said, "and I'll tell you everything." "Welcome. My name is Dorothy Elaine Haverford. I am 74 years old. I live in a white house with green shutters on Callaway Lane in Savannah, Georgia, the same house where I raised my daughter. Wendy, and before that, helped raise my younger brother after our mother got sick. I have lived in this house for 38 years. I know every creak in the floorboards and every draft in the hallway, and I know where the light falls in the kitchen on Sunday mornings because I have drunk my coffee in that kitchen for 38 Sunday mornings a year for 38 years. I taught 4th grade at Harmon Elementary School for 31 years. I retired at 67. In that time, I taught reading and long, division, and the proper use of a semicolon to approximately 840 children, many of whom still stop me in the grocery store to say hello, and some of whom have children of their own now who I have also taught. I say all of this because I want you to understand who I am before I tell you what my daughter did. I am not a woman who makes trouble. I am not dramatic. I do not perform for sympathy. I raised Wendy alone after her father Walter passed when she was 11 years old, and I did it on a teacher's salary. And I did not complain about it because complaining doesn't fill a refrigerator or hem a school uniform or sit with a grieving child at 2 in the morning when the dark gets too big. I know what things cost. I know what people are worth. I have spent my whole life knowing the difference. Wendy is 46 years old. She is beautiful in the way her father was beautiful. Dark hair, good bones, a smile that makes rooms warmer when she chooses to use it. She married Brent Calloway 11 years ago, and they live in a 4-bedroom house in the Magnolia Heights neighborhood, where the lawns are kept by services and the cars are leased and the Christmas cards are professionally photographed. Brent is a decent man who works in insurance and coaches their son Cooper's Little League team and calls me Dorothy with the warmth of someone who means it as affection. Wendy and I were close once. I want to say that plainly because it matters for everything that follows. We were close in the way mothers and daughters can be when they have survived hard things together. Walter's death, the lean years, the years when it was just the two of us in this house sharing one car and clipping, coupons and watching movies on a television that was 15 years old because a new one wasn't in the budget. We knew each other. We had earned each other. Then Wendy started earning money of her own, good money, and she discovered that money could buy distance from the person she used to be. Not all at once, slowly, the way a tide goes out. You don't notice until you're standing on wet sand wondering where the water went. She stopped calling as often. The visits got shorter. She started talking about the neighborhood she lived in with a particular pride that had an edge to it. an edge that pointed quietly at where I lived. She started bringing gifts that felt like corrections. A new coffee maker when mine worked fine. A coat because yours is looking a little worn. Mom, a gift card to a salon because, and I remember this exactly, you deserve a little pampering. What I deserved was for my daughter to sit at my kitchen table and drink coffee from the coffee maker that worked fine and talked to me like I was a person and not a project. I noticed. I said nothing. I told myself it was just success adjusting her, the way success adjusts people sometimes, and she'd find her way back. I kept my door open. I kept Thursday nights free in case she wanted dinner. I kept loving her the way you love children, without conditions and without keeping score. I should tell you about the Sunday brunch so you understand it fully. The brunch was Wendy's idea. Her birthday is in April, and she had decided, not asked, decided that we would celebrate at Magnolia's Bistro, which is the kind of restaurant where the portions are architectural and the prices are not listed on the menu. Because if you need to ask, you're in the wrong room. The guest list was Wendy and Brent, their two children Cooper, who is 9, and Addison, who is 6. Wendy's friend group, Pamela, Greta, and Greta's husband Ted, and me. I was pleased to be included. I want to say that honestly. I had been feeling the distance and I thought the invitation meant she was pulling me back in. I put on my good dress, navy, a little lace at the collar, the one I wear for occasions, and I drove to Savannah and I parked and I walked into Magnolia's Bistro feeling like a woman going to her daughter's birthday and grateful for it. The table was beautiful. Flowers in the center, mimosas already poured, everyone dressed in bright in the April morning light. Cooper ran to me first, the way 9-year-old boys run when they've been sitting still too long, and I held him and felt his knobbly elbows, and his too fast heartbeat and thought about Walter, who had Cooper's same bony hugs. Addison showed me her new shoes. They were pink with small flowers, and she was very serious about them. I admired them properly. I sat down. I was happy. I was genuinely simply happy to be there. The meal was lovely for the first hour. The food was remarkable. I had eggs, Benedict with a hollandaise that I will remember on my deathbed, and the conversation was easy and warm. Pamela asked about my retirement and actually listened to the answer. Ted told a long story about a camping trip that went wrong, and it was funny enough that I laughed until my eyes watered. Even Wendy was warm, relaxed, the version of herself I recognized. I thought I was worried for nothing. She just needed time. We're fine. We're still us. Dessert was a chocolate cake the restaurant brought out for Wendy's birthday. Candles lit, the whole table singing. I watched my daughter's face in the candlelight. 46 years old. Lovely, laughing. And I thought about the 11-year-old who had cried in my arms when her father died, and I felt the enormous, ordinary love of having raised a person, all the way to adulthood, and gotten to watch her become herself. Then the waiter came to ask about the check. He was young. As I said, professional. He asked pleasantly whether it would be one bill or separate. Brent started to say one bill. I saw him open his mouth, and Wendy put her hand over his and said, without looking up from her phone, separate her bill. She pays for herself. Her. Not my mother would like to pay separately, or Dorothy. Would you prefer your own check? Just her. Like I was a problem to be managed. Like I was a her sitting at the edge of a table that had never quite been meant for me. The table went quiet. Not the whole table. Pamela and Greta were looking at their phones. Ted was talking to Cooper, but the quiet that mattered. The waiter's eyes. Brent's face. The way Addison looked up and then back down, because children sense when adults are uncomfortable, even when they don't understand why. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at her phone. I looked at the waiter. I gave him the small nod. He nodded back barely. Went to get the check. I did not say anything. I did not make a scene. I opened my purse and I found my card and I set it on the table and I waited. And in the waiting, I made a decision. Not an angry decision. A clear one. The kind that arrives quietly when you have been patient long enough. I was 74 years old. I had raised this woman on my own. I had gone without things so she could have things. I had sat with her in hospital, waiting rooms and graduation ceremonies and the darkest night of her life when her father stopped breathing, and she didn't understand yet what that meant forever. I had loved her every day for 46 years without conditions and without a receipt. And she had told a waiter to separate my bill at her birthday brunch because she did not want to pay for my eggs Benedict. Not for money. Wendy had money. This was not about money. This was about what she thought I was worth at her table. I paid my bill. I said my goodbyes warmly, and I kissed the children, and I told Wendy happy birthday, and I meant it. I drove home. I went inside. I sat in my kitchen with my coffee, and I let myself feel it fully. The particular grief of being made small by someone who was made from you. And then I started thinking clearly. The call from Brent came that evening. He'd seen the whole thing. He'd tried to say something in the restaurant after I left. I learned this later, and Wendy had waved it off. She's fine, she can afford it. We're not made of money. Brent. He had sat with that through. The rest of the afternoon and by evening, it had become something he couldn't swallow anymore. When he came over Thursday, I made coffee and we sat at the kitchen table and I told him simply what had been happening. Not just the brunch. The coat that was a correction. The coffee maker I didn't ask for. The visits that had been getting shorter. The way Wendy had stopped saying we when she talked about our family and started saying, I and mine, the distance that had been growing so gradually. I'd almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Brent listened with his hands around, his mug in his face doing the complicated math of a man who loves his wife and can see clearly that she has done something wrong. She's ashamed, he said finally. Of what? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Not of you. Of where she came from. Of the years before the money. She doesn't talk about it, but I've seen it. When her friends talk about growing up and vacation houses and country clubs, Wendy gets very quiet, and then very bright, the fake bright. And I think somewhere in that he stopped. She's been putting distance between herself and everything that reminds her of those years. And you remind her. I remind her of who she is, I said. Yes, he said. I think that's exactly it. It was a sad diagnosis. It was also a true one. I had watched it happen without naming it, and now that it had a name, I could see the shape of it clearly. My daughter was ashamed, not of me precisely, but of the version of herself that had needed me, the version in the second hand, shoes and the one-car household, and the free lunch program at school. She had worked very hard to leave that version behind, and I was a door she kept having to walk past on the way out. I thought about that for a long time after Brent left. I thought about Walter. Walter, who had died with $40 in his checking account and a paid-off truck, and the knowledge that his daughter thought he hung the moon. Walter, who would never have understood the math Wendy had done at that table, who had taken me to diners for 30 years and always asked the waitress her name first, who had raised a little girl who ran to him across parking lots and raised her. We had raised her to know that how you treated people told the whole story of who you were, somewhere between the free lunch program and Magnolia Heights. Wendy had unlearned that lesson. My job as her mother was to teach it again. I called Wendy the following Tuesday. I kept my voice warm and I said I'd like to have her for dinner. Just the two of us on Saturday. She said yes with the slight wariness of someone who suspects they are about to be confronted and is already preparing defenses. I spent Saturday cooking. A real dinner, the pot roast Walter used to ask for every birthday. Roasted vegetables, the cornbread from my mother's recipe that I still make from memory. I set the table with the good dishes, the ones with the blue border that were a wedding gift in 1974, and have outlasted the marriage and the man and 50 years of ordinary Saturdays. I put flowers in the center. I put on the same navy dress with the lace collar. If Wendy was going to look at me and decide what I was worth, I was going to make sure she was looking clearly. She arrived at 6:30. She hugged me at the door with the slightly stiff hug of someone who is on guard. I took her coat. I poured her wine. I asked about Cooper's baseball. I asked about Addison's dance class. I let her settle into the meal, The way you let someone settle into a room before you say the hard thing. After dinner, after the dishes were stacked and the coffee was poured, I folded my hands on the table and I said, I want to talk about the restaurant. Wendy's chin went up slightly. Mom, it was just about the check. No, it wasn't, Elle said, gently. The way I used to say it to 8-year-olds, who gave me explanations that didn't hold up. We both know it wasn't. She was quiet. You said her, I said. Not my mother. Not Dorothy, her. You said to a stranger, in front of your friends and your children, separate her bill. Like I was a problem at your table. Wendy looked at her coffee cup. I want to ask you something, I said. And I want you to actually think before you answer. Not the answer that makes this easier. The true one. She looked up. Are you ashamed of me? The word landed on the table between us. I watched her face and I watched the thing she'd been managing for years crack slightly at the surface. No, she said, too fast. Wendy. She pressed her lips together. She looked at the blue-bordered dishes. She looked at the cornbread pan still on the counter. She looked at the kitchen she had grown up in. The same wallpaper, the same light, the same creak in the third floorboard from the door. And I watched her see it the way you see a place when you have been away from it. Long enough to forget it and then come back. I don't know, she said finally. Her voice was smaller than I had heard it since she was a child. I don't know. I don't think it's you. I think it's, she stopped. When I'm with Pamela and Greta and I hear the things they talk about, the places they went, the things their families had, I feel, she stopped again. Like you came from somewhere lesser, I said. I know that's terrible. It's not terrible, I said. It's human. But I want to tell you something about where you came from, Wendy, and I want you to listen to me all the way to the end. She nodded. She was holding her coffee cup with both hands the way she used to hold her juice cup at this same table 35 years ago, and I felt the full weight of time passing. The way it does when you're a parent, all the years stacked inside the moment, the child inside the adult, the past inside the present. You came from a family that ate dinner together every night, I said. Not in a restaurant. At this table. You came from a father who fixed things. Himself because we couldn't always pay someone to fix them. And who taught you to be proud of knowing how things worked. You came from a mother who taught other people's children for 31 years and not once in 31 years sent a child home without knowing someone at that school cared. Whether they learned to read, I kept my voice level. This was not a speech for anger. This was a lesson. You came from a family that had less money than some people and more character than most. That distinction matters. It is the only distinction that actually matters in the end. Wendy was looking at me and her eyes were bright. When you told that waiter to separate my bill, I said, you weren't separating the check. You were telling everyone at that table, including your children, that your mother doesn't belong at the table you've built, that she's a guest who pays her own way at her own daughter's birthday. Mom, Cooper is 9 years old, I said. He watches everything. He saw what you did. Children always see. And what he saw was how you treat the person who raised you when it becomes inconvenient to claim her. That landed. I saw it land. Wendy pressed 2 fingers to her lips and looked away. I'm not telling you this to make you feel terrible, I said. I'm telling you this because you are my daughter and I love you past all reason. And I know who you are underneath the house in Magnolia Heights and the restaurant that doesn't put prices on the menu. I know who you are because I was there when you became yourself. And the person you are is better than what you did last Sunday. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside a car went past on Callaway Lane. The refrigerator hummed. I'm sorry, Wendy said. It came out rough and plain, no gloss on it. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know why She stopped. I do know why. I just don't like why. I know, I said. That's the beginning of something. She cried. I let her. That's part of the job. You let them cry, and you don't rush the crying, and you don't fix it before it's finished. She cried the way adults cry when they've caught themselves doing something they can't excuse, with a kind of grief that is partly for the act and partly for the person they thought they were before the act. I handed her a dish towel because that is what is available. In kitchens, and sometimes the homely, remedy is the right one. I've been doing this for a while, she said when she could speak. Haven't I? A while, I said. The coat. Among other things. I kept telling myself you needed things. That I was helping. You were correcting, I said, not unkindly. There's a difference. She wiped her face with the dish towel. She looked around the kitchen again, slower this time. I miss this kitchen, she said, which was not what I expected her to say. I didn't know I missed it until right now. I used to do my homework at this table. You did, I said. You used to put your feet up on that chair and your father would walk by and push them off and you'd put them back up the second he turned around. She laughed. A short, wet sound. He never actually made me stop. No, I said. He thought it was funny. He just had a parental reputation to maintain. We sat for a while then without talking about anything difficult. I told her about Harmon, Elementary's new principal, and the changes she'd made to the reading program, which I had opinions about. Wendy told me about Addison's spring recital. We finished our coffee. The kitchen did what it always does, held us, the way old rooms hold the people who have filled them with ordinary years. Before she left, she stood at the door with her coat on, and she looked at me the way she used to. Look at me when she was small, and had done something wrong and was hoping. I still thought she was good. I'm going to do better, she said. I know, I said. I mean it. I believe you, I said. But Wendy, I need you to hear me clearly. I am your mother. Not a bill to be separated. Not a guest at your table. Your mother, who raised you, who is still here, who is not going anywhere. You do not get to be ashamed of me. Whatever you have built and however far you have come, you do not get to leave me outside of it. I held her eyes. Those are the terms. We can have any kind of relationship you want to build. But it starts with those terms. She nodded. She understood. She kissed me on the cheek and held on for a moment, the way she hadn't in years, the child hold, the one she'd had since she was small enough to carry. Then she went home. Here is how things settled in the months after. The true accounting. The Sunday brunches are different now. We still go to Magnolia's Bistro sometimes. Because Addison loves the eggs and Cooper will eat the whole breadbasket if you let him. But the check comes and Brent pays. And I let him and Wendy doesn't say a word about it. It is a small thing. It means everything. Wendy comes to my kitchen more. Not for special occasions, for ordinary Thursdays. She'll call on a Wednesday and say, "Are you doing anything tomorrow?" And I'll say, "Come for dinner," and she'll come and we'll sit at the blue-bordered table and talk about ordinary things. She puts her feet up on the chair sometimes. I push them off. She puts them back. Cooper asked me at Easter where I grew up, and I told him about the house in Beaufort, where I was raised and the school I went to and the way things were. He listened with the serious attention of a 9-year-old who is deciding what kind of person to be. Then he said, "Were you poor?" I said, "We had enough of the things that mattered and we knew it." "That's not poor." He thought about that. Then he said, "Okay," in the satisfied voice of someone who has received a sufficient answer, and went back to his Easter basket. Wendy was in the doorway. She'd heard. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me and nodded once, the way her father used to nod when words weren't the right size for the thing. Pamela, Wendy's friend, stopped me at the Piggly, Wiggly on Forsyth Street about 2 months after the brunch. She said, "I've been wanting to tell you. What Wendy said at the restaurant was wrong. I should have said something at the time." She looked uncomfortable but genuine. "I'm sorry I didn't." I thanked her. She meant it and it cost her something to say it, and those are the only apologies worth accepting. "Greta, I see less." That's fine. Not every person in your daughter's life is meant to be in yours. My kitchen still smells like pot roast on Saturdays. The floorboard still creaks in the same place. The blue-bordered dishes are still in the same cabinet they have been in for 50 years. And they are still good, still whole, still beautiful in the steady way of things made to last. Walter has been gone for 35 years and I still talk to him. Sometimes in the kitchen the way you talk to the people who knew you best. I told him about the brunch. I told him what Wendy said and what I said back and how she cried with the dish towel. I told him Cooper asked if we were poor and what I told him. I think you'd have handled it better, I said, the way I always say. He always did the hard things with more grace than I managed. But I did it, Walter. I told her the terms. I held the line. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, Callaway Lane went about its Saturday business. I think he'd have been satisfied. I made a pot of coffee and sat down in my chair at the table where my daughter used to do her homework with her feet on the chair, and I drank it slowly in the Sunday morning, light that I know so well because I have watched it move across this kitchen for 38 years. I am 74 years old. I am a retired school teacher. I live in a white house with green shutters on a street. I have known for longer than most people have been alive. I raised a daughter alone through the years that tested us. And I loved her through the years she forgot where she came from. And I will love her through the years she's finding her way back. That is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the whole thing. If someone at your table has been made to feel like a separate bill, a footnote, a guest who pays her own way at her own family's table, say something. Don't wait for the moment to pass. The moment is where the lesson lives. And if you are the one who said it, the one who pointed at someone you love and called them her, when you should have said mine, it is not too late. Call her, make the dinner. Sit at the table, say the true thing, not the easy one. That's my story. One Sunday brunch, one waiter, one sentence that cost more than the Eggs Benedict. Drop a comment if it meant something to you. Hit subscribe. And I'll see you next time.